Welcome to Economics 1010. We are on Chapter 10. All right, you guys are getting through it. Getting it down. The business cycle, okay? In other words, why do we always go boom and bust and boom and all those things on a roller coaster? We're going over that, okay? We're going to talk about how we measure the economy. We're going to talk about unemployment. We're going to discuss why inflation is a problem. We're going to look at full employment, price stability, and we're going to go over the U.S. track record on growth, employment, inflation. We're going to be looking at how we've been doing over the years and what's going to keep happening over and over, okay? And we call it a cycle for a reason, because it's going to keep happening. Okay, the goal of this chapter is to focus on the nature of the business cycle, the problems of unemployment and inflation. So we got problems. We're going to talk about how we deal with those problems and what's going on with our business cycle, okay? A business cycle is an alternating periods of economic growth and contraction. So we're going to boom and bust, boom and bust. We call that economic growth and contraction, okay? The Great Depression became the springboard to macroeconomics, the study of aggregate economic behavior. Before that, people didn't care, okay? People are like, just let the market be. The market's doing great. Go free, market, go free. Oh, where are you going? No, market, come back. Come back. Don't go over the cliff. Called the Great Depression. And after the Great Depression, people say, you know what? We better study this. And this better not happen again to this degree. And that's what we've been trying to do with economics ever since. Okay? They said we cannot have things blow up like it did and to have so many problems. Because the thing is, when you look at the economic depression, did we all of a sudden lose factories? Were we all of a sudden hit by some earthquake or tornado? No. We had poor economics, and that's what caused the Great Depression. And it's really interesting to think about. That's like we didn't lose our ability to manufacture. We didn't all of a sudden get hit by a war. We didn't all of a sudden have these things like come in and devastate us. We just had poor economic policies, which then led to retractions everywhere, and then all of a sudden everything fell apart. Okay, because of this bust, we're now looking at how to prevent it. Okay. We're going to look at these things very specifically. One goal of macroeconomic theory is explaining the business cycle. So one thing, in order to do effective policies, we have to understand what's actually going on. We have to explain it. Why do things go boom and then bust? Okay. Macro policy tries to control the business cycle. Okay. So in other words, if things go bust and boom, maybe we can make it so we don't boom so much that we don't end up with a huge bust afterwards, and we try to even out this growth. Okay. We know we're going to have ups and downs, but if we can smooth it out and have it just keep going up in general, we're going to be set. Okay? There are three basic measures we look for. Okay? This is what they always shout on the news. Output growth. Our GDP is going up. We're doing more economically. Hurrah! Unemployment. People have money to buy things because they're employed. Okay? And then inflation. If we're able to keep inflation in check, prices are stable, markets become stable, okay? Output growth is in real GDP. Okay, remember we talked about the GDPs before? You had nominal and real. What's the difference? Real takes inflation into account because we don't care about if prices double. We care about if people are actually producing more. It needs to be real, needs to have inflation in there, okay? During an economic expansion, real GDP grows. Production possibilities shift outward. So remember that production possibility curve all the way from chapter 1? It goes outward because we can grow more. No matter what mix of output we choose, we can do more. And the economy's health is based on that, okay? During economic contraction, real GDP falls. Resources may be underutilized. See, this is one thing that's interesting. We don't all of a sudden lose factories. We don't wake up one day and be like, there was a factory somewhere in the middle of town and it just disappeared into some vortex. No. If it's an economic problem caused by economic policy, it's just not being used anymore. The machines could be there, the ability to produce is there, but we're just not doing it anymore. And so we have a downturn in the economy, okay? And so that's what's really sad when we have these economic contractions, because we're not losing our ability to use things. We're just not using them even though they're there because we're having issues as far as demand and making sure the cycle is able to keep going. All right? Business cycles resemble a roller coaster. Yeah, Roller Coaster. Anyone play Roller Coaster Tycoon? Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 is a pretty good one. I like the original number 2. You guys should look that up. Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. Great game. Love that game. Okay, output rises. Peaks, falls, bottoms, and rises again. Let's see it. Okay, so number 1, we have peak, trough, peak, trough, peak, trough. But in addition to that, even though it's going up and down, in general, the line is going up, okay? If things are going well. So in time, we're thinking that the entire overall average growth is going up, even though we might have peaks and troughs throughout it. So we have short run cycles, but in the long run, that line right there, we have economic growth, okay? This is the business cycle. Increases in real GDP are inconsistent with a pattern of steps, stumbles, and setbacks, okay? So in other words, things happen. What happened? Well, let's take a look. We got these recessions, okay? Everywhere you see a blue line, that's where a recession came in. So we had the Great Depression, we had all of other things going on, okay? And the thing that's interesting, okay, after the Great Depression, we go to 1940, okay, we recovered from it. And the thing that you'll notice, if we ever have super recoveries, what's generally going to happen? A super bust. And so what it is the economy gets going so fast, it gets over leveraged, that when people realize things aren't valued what they're supposed to be valued at, everyone retracts their stuff, and everyone retracts so readily that it just plummets, okay? If you look in there, you can see it just plummet down there, okay? As we keep going, and then you'll see this pattern continue to go over and over, okay? Also, one thing to look at too is the long-term average growth here on the right side, okay? Long-term, we have 3%. Even though it's been up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, overall we're at 3% growth, okay? Other than that, I'm going to tell you guys, when you look at this graph, the easiest way to predict a big recession is a big boom. That's the easiest way. If you don't see very big booms, you don't see very big recessions going on. That's how you predict the market. It's very hard to predict a recession, but it's very easy to predict the boom you're currently in and know a recession is coming, okay? You might lose out on some profits when you try and stabilize your investments, prepare for that recession, but it's guaranteed almost, okay? And the other thing that's interesting too, when you look at that long-term average growth 3%, when we look at from 2000 to 2010 and beyond, we're not really going up into that big a high of booms anymore, okay? We still had some decent losses, which is kind of interesting, okay? We're recovering and just not recovering very high, okay? Let's go on. The Great Depression is the worst economic decline in U.S. history. Real GDP fell by 30%. So imagine all the goods you have in your house and 30% of them being lit on fire. That's what it's like, just having 30% of your stuff gone. And yet, you still have constant costs. You have these fixed costs, and that's why it hurt people so bad, is because it was such a huge bust. You still had all these fixed costs as far as your livelihood. It just wiped people out. There was another decline in 1936 through 37. Then real GDP in 1939 was approximately that of 1929. So what's that mean? Okay. Over the 10 years, that's how long it took to have some sort of recovery, okay? Approximately that of 1929, okay? So in other words, from 1929 and then when it went down a huge amount, it took 10 years just to get back on track. That's how big, okay? Real GDP per capita in 1939 was lower than that of 1929. That's the other thing, okay? Even though we got back as far as the real GDP, when you take it out per person, do we have more people come in since 1929, 1939? Yeah. So even after that 10 years, we still didn't get back per person because we had more people added and we just got back to where we were before. And so that's the same amount of resources. We had more people needing them. We had a lower per capita even then. Okay? That's how big it was. Even after 10 years, we still weren't good because you had to take per capita into effect. World War II greatly increased the demand for goods and services and ended the Great Depression. Yeah, a war got us out of it. Why? Government said we're going to war. The government now became the demand curve and said, we need these goods, we need these things, and a large of the government's demand just jumped in and that curve, really spurred it on, and they jumped into that curve, and then people were able to produce because there was demand for it. Were they producing things that were necessarily useful for the houses? Not so much. You still had a lot of rationing and things going on during the war, but people were producing. People were working, which was big because before you had a lot of people just not able to work. Okay, our output grew by 19% in 1942. And the other thing too about these factories, okay, even though we weren't producing consumer goods at that time, a lot of consumer goods, we were producing goods in general, and it's very easy to retool a factory afterwards. Okay, we can take car factories, have them produce tanks, give them a lot of investment because we need to produce a lot of those tanks, and then after we're done, change that to what we're producing, okay? Economy reached full employment during that time. People were going crazy. Throughout the war, production capacity was strained to the limit. That's what's interesting. You care about efficiency in a war? No. I want as many missiles and tanks as possible. So are we efficient? No. Do we have huge debt on that? Yeah. We just want to make as much as possible. Okay. Since World War II, the U.S. economy has experienced alternating growth and contractions. Okay. A persistent contraction is called a recession. Okay. So this is it. You have contractions. When does a contraction become a recession? Where real GDP declines for at least 2 consecutive quarters. Okay. So in other words, 6 months. 2 consecutive quarters, real GDP declines. Okay. 12 U.S. recessions since 1944. So, even though we might learn a lot about economics, this is just what's bound to happen. All we can do is minimize the recessions. All we can do is smooth out that growth so it's a smoother long-term growth. More stable economy. We can't eliminate it. When output declines, guess what happens? People that were producing that output are eliminated. Their jobs are gone. Okay. Unemployment occurs when labor force participants are unable to find jobs. This happens. Okay. When you're unable to find a job, your job goes away. You're now unemployed. The labor force consists of everyone over the age of 16. Okay. Not 18, 16. We're including you in. But you have to have these 2 conditions. You must be working or actively seek paid employment. You're part of the labor force. So either you're currently working or trying to work and get paid for that employment. You're not just trying to go serve people. You want to get paid. Okay? Consider you part of the labor force. So total population is about 318 million. Okay, as of this textbook's written, it's probably changed by now. Output of the labor force about 162 million. Okay. Under the age of 16, you have 66 million. So they're not included if you're under 16. So there's 66 million people are not included because they're under 16. 18 million are homemakers. You're not included if you're a homemaker. If you're not trying to find paid work, you're not included in the labor force. In school. If you're in school, we don't include you in the labor force. Retired, you're not included. Okay. Institutionalized. Okay, if you were institutionalized, it could be prison, it could be mental, whatever. If you're institutionalized, you're not included. There's 4 million people in the U.S. that are in institutions. 18 million other. We don't know what there is for you. You're just in other, okay? We know you're not working and you're not looking for paid work. Those people are not included. Okay? So overall, out of the labor force, 162 million. In the labor force, 156 million. So only about half the people in the U.S. are considered part of the labor force. And out of that half, it's a little bit less. It's 162 to 156. So employed, we got 146.3 million employed. Unemployed, 9.6 million. Okay? And we'll go through what that means as far as figuring out the rates, okay? The unemployment rate assesses how well labor force participants are faring, okay? The unemployment rate equals the number of unemployed divided by the labor force, okay? So you take the number unemployed, divide it by the labor force. So if we go over here, back to this slide, I'll show you back here. What's the unemployed? 9.6. Then you got in the labor force, 156 million, okay? Right there. To be unemployed, a person must be jobless, actively seeking paid employment, okay? The thing it does not constitute for is if you're underemployed. And this is a big thing. It's like, hey, I have a 4-year degree, but I'm making a little bit over minimum wage. Yeah, the statistics make it look like we're doing well. Sometimes we're not because of things like underemployment and also discouraged workers, people who just give up looking, okay? The employment rate is the second measure of the economy's health. So first was GDP. If I take another vital sign, it'd be the unemployment rate, which those numbers can be skewed, as we talked about earlier, okay? Referred to as an index of human misery. Because think about it. If you're unemployed, unemployment are the most oppressed people you can see most of the time. Okay, you're depressed. If you're and they don't even take into account underemployed people, but if you're unemployed, your situation's very uncertain, especially if you have people depending on you. If you ever gone through people with hardships, being unemployed, it is rough. Very rough. Okay? And so if we look at this index of human misery, this is what it looks like over time, okay? The higher that is, that's the more misery they were facing at that point as far as the rate of unemployment, okay? So you can see some spikes in there. And let me tell you, it's really rough when you're unemployed. And you can just see this throughout our history, okay? And you'll see that it's actually inverse of the booms and busts, okay? It's an inverse of the booms, because when people are boomed, they're obviously employed. We usually reach almost full employment. Okay, these are some stats as far as how unemployment affects you. Okay, unemployment can significantly affect families' welfare. It's not just you that's unemployed. If you are a breadwinner of some sort, whether it be male or female, increased family stress goes up by about 77%. In fact, most divorces are over money, and a lot of times unemployment plays a part in that, or underemployment. Okay, drew down savings. If you don't have money, you have to use savings. So 67% have to draw out of their savings, not just their residual funds. They use those up, and then they're even going into savings at this point. Okay. Reduce food spending. You're not going to be spending much on food as much as you used to, because you got to pare down. Okay. 67%. This is a big one. Reduce spending on children. 61%. Oh, you want to go learn a new sport? You want to become more involved in your school? You want to do this? You want more clothes for school? You want some other things? Sorry, we're just going to have to nix that out. We're going to have to cut down. We're going to have to reduce it. Okay? And this is where children feel it. Okay? Postponed medical care. This affects all of us, because if that person can't work, they're not contributing. And the reason why they don't go get their medical care done is because they don't got money for it. So you get this cylindrical problem of people not getting treated because they don't have money, and they don't have money because they're not getting treated so they can work better. All right, we get issues like this happening all the time. Lost health insurance. This is one of the craziest ones. 32%. If you don't have a job, it's kind of hard to keep paying for insurance for the health. Okay, it's kind of hard to do that. And this is why we need to get more health insurance, not associated with employment, because that's when you need health insurance the most, usually, because you're already suffering everywhere else. Okay. Lost telephone service. 30%. Okay, so it includes cell phones. Other family member worked more, 29%. Now, I think it's interesting. This has changed a lot, okay? Back in the days when you usually had just one breadwinner in the house, that would be like 70 or 80% because they could just pick up the slack. But right now, you already have other people already doing dual income. And so worked more just means that person's already working, and so they're just going to have the other person work more. So they might already be working a full-time job and then pick up a second job or increase their hours at that job or something, okay? Interrupted schooling, yeah. A lot of people can be working and also they don't have the money anymore. They drop out. They don't have the finances. 14% lose utilities, okay? Power, water, those things can get cut off, and it takes a while for them to get cut off, but if there's no return to your employment, if it's getting worse and worse, and sometimes when you're unemployed, it gets worse because it's hard to get a job. Sometimes after you get unemployed for so long, those things get cut off. Okay? Macroeconomics. Let's move on. Macroeconomics prescribe low, but not zero unemployment. Okay? Interesting. Low, but not zero. Why? Because some types of unemployment are inevitable and desirable. In other words, some unemployment's going to exist just because people move around in the economy. Okay? People move around, their skills, they move around. Things have to be able to flow. Now, if you have too much just sitting there doing nothing, that's an issue, but there needs to be some flow going on. Seasonal unemployment, okay? So let's say I work at a farm. Well, if my farm no longer needs me because we work in certain seasons, I'm done. Let's say I run a haunted house. Same thing. Once October's over, I'm gonna be unemployed seasonally. I make a lot of money while I'm employed, but then after that, I am unemployed. Frictional unemployment, okay? We have frictional unemployment, structural unemployment, okay? So those are the other types of unemployment in there, and basically they just go along with whether the jobs were lost or whether we actually need to retrain people at this point, okay? So full employment with lowest possible rate of unemployment, compatible with price stability, is a better goal, okay? This is the one that really hurts you, is cylindrical unemployment, okay? We want zero. That cylindrical unemployment just means there isn't jobs, period, for people. Okay, estimated between 4 and 6%. Permits seasonal, frictional, and structural unemployment. Those ones are okay. We're gonna have frictional. We're gonna have structural. We're gonna have to have people where they have to get retrained for jobs. You have places where jobs just move, and therefore people have to move to wherever they need to move in their new jobs going. Cylindrical, there's just not jobs, period. Okay, so the bad one you don't want is cylindrical. Okay, when output rises, increased pressure on prices may cause inflation. Inflation is an increase in the average level of prices of goods and services, not a change in any specific price. Okay, so we don't care about a specific price. Like individual prices can move up and down. We're saying as a whole, our price is moving up, and if so, that's what inflation is. So you're going to look at a good basket of these goods and services and see how these prices are changing overall. Deflation is a decrease in average price levels of goods and services. So remember, we're looking at sets of prices, all the prices, not just one. You can have the inflation happening and then something else, a price go down while the average prices of all the other products are going up. Okay. When output rises, increased pressure on prices may cause inflation. Okay. As an economy reaches full employment, prices begin to rise. Okay, so if we're reaching full employment, that means more people have money to buy stuff with because they're employed. We have more dollars chasing these products. And unless we're producing more products per person, okay, you're going to have inflation happen, okay? Because you have more dollars chasing these things. So the demands for good outstrip supply, okay? That's really what it is. When demands for good outstrip supply, inflation occurs. And costs of production rise. Remember that scale of efficiency we're talking about in all the other chapters? If you're producing at the edge of that efficiency, okay, you're not producing or getting much more for all that extra output you're putting into it, but you are paying a lot more of your workers the exact same, and so those workers have that much more to go bid on with prices, but you're not adding that much more as far as supply, and that's why demand for goods outstrips supply in that case, and that will cause inflation. Even without changes in the average price level, individual prices may rise or fall continuously. Okay, so just going back to what I said, you're looking at averages, individual prices, it just depends on that sector. Okay, the relative price is the price of one good in comparison with the price of other goods. Okay, that's just pretty straightforward. You're just comparing prices there. Relative price are market signals that help reallocate sources. So, for example, if I saw mustard all of a sudden costing $4 and for a bottle, meanwhile ketchup's still at $1, what happens? Well, a lot more people, when they start to get condiments for hot dogs or burgers or whatever, look at it and they're like, I'm just going to start bidding up the price of ketchup now, and then if people stop buying mustard because it's crazy high, the price will, there's going to be price signals that are going to force it downward because people are going to start bidding up ketchup and bidding down mustard, and vice versa. You can also see it in supply. If there's a whole lot of money going towards mustard, all of a sudden people start producing more mustard, and then that will also cause it to come down. So price signaling is just simple, and it happens all the time, and people just look at their alternative best prices to buy at. Inflation does not reallocate resources. Okay, so inflation is an overall increase. Relative prices, though, when I see something crazy high, either there's going to be a lot of supply to meet that price, Or I'm going to look at alternatives, start buying there, and then people aren't going to bid that price up. That price will naturally fall down. So it's either going to be an increase in supply or a decrease in demand that will draw that price down. Inflation is everything moving up and down. It does not reallocate resources. Okay. There are costs to inflation. Surprise, surprise. Inflation is redistributive, making some better off and others worse off. That's right. Based on where you are in society and your current position, inflation could be more helpful to you, okay? And it could hurt you more. Welfare effects are unequal, meaning if it's going to help some people more and other people less, okay? Selling higher priced goods and services causes an increase in purchasing power, referred to as the price effect, okay? So, overall, I mean, kind of exactly what it's saying. Selling higher priced goods and services causes an increase in purchasing power. Okay. Here's a good example over here. Okay, so individual prices do not change at the same rate as the average price level. Over here, we're seeing an average increase of 1.6. That's an inflation of 1.6 going up. However, during this, some things went down in price. Fresh fish, bananas, gasoline, eggs. Meanwhile, other things went up a lot higher than the average. Apples, textbooks, chicken. One that I'll probably notice you guys will be college tuition. I'm surprised it's not a lot more than that, but college tuition just every year it gets ridiculous. It just keeps going up. So inflation rates can be used to construct real incomes. Okay, what a real income is like people always say, "Oh, you're earning a lot more money than I did when I was your age." I'm like, well, what did your money buy you? That's what a real income is. What could you actually buy with the money you were given? So nominal income is the amount of money income received in a given period measured in current dollars. So for example, back in the day, say grandpa made $50,000. Today I make $120,000. You'd be like thinking, wow, you're making a lot more money than grandpa. The question is, when did grandpa live and how much goods did that $50,000 buy? Did that $50,000 buy the equivalent of $120,000 today? That's where you got to really look at in order to compare. Real income in constant dollars, okay? Nominal income adjusted for inflation. So we're going to look at the same income and say, what can they both buy, okay? We're going to compare them as close as possible with constant dollars. Real wages grow if nominal wages outpace price increases, okay? So example, if our wages go up by 5% and inflation goes up by 2%, then our real wages, as far as what we're getting, is that difference in the middle, that 3%. Okay? So they're showing us right here. Okay? Prices, nominal wages, real wages. This graph is crazy because they are hiding a lot of information they should. Why am I telling you this? Look at this graph. Okay? This is what really ticks me off when I use different books. Look at, it starts at year 1982. Why doesn't it include the 1900s as far as real wages? They don't want you to know how stagnant your wages have become. They don't want you to know just how great of an increase we have had, and then all of a sudden, bloop. It would look a lot different. Okay. Since 1982, though, nominal wages and prices have been the same, and so what's happened since 1982? You haven't really been getting much of any. For the amount of production, the amount of increase, the amount of growth we've had in the economy hasn't been really been going to workers. Interesting. Okay. While real income isn't affected by inflation, nominal income is. So nominal income will always change with inflation. Real income, though, you adjust it for that inflation, so it's going to stay the same. Those with nominal incomes rising faster than inflation receive a larger share of total income, referred to as the income effect. Okay, so in other words, as long as you're getting more income than inflation, you're ahead of the curve. Then you're actually gaining income. But let's say your company gives you a raise for 3%, but inflation for some crazy reason is 5%. You're actually losing money. Even though technically your income went up, your purchasing power went down based on inflation being higher than what you rose. So whenever you go to get jobs, let people know, I need an increase of about 3% just to keep up with inflation. And then if you think I'm valuable and did something for you, give me an increase of 5%, because then that 2% difference is what I actually earned. Crazy. All right. Inflation redistributes income to those who own assets that increase in real value. So the thing that's interesting, if you want to protect yourself from inflation, own items, okay? Because prices are rising, the items stay the same, and so if you have actual items, those prices for those items will go up. But if you just have cash on hand and inflation goes up, you're losing money, okay? Let me give you an example, okay? Let's say you have a savings account that pays 1% interest, okay? Savings account, 1% interest. Sounds good, doesn't it? What if inflation's 2%? If inflation's 2% and your savings account's giving you 1%, you are getting negative 1% gain every year as far as what that money can actually do for you. It's not put into something that's protected like an actual physical item that would then go up with inflation. Okay? Think about that, okay? Think about that as far as where your investments are. And this is the whole thing that's interesting. Whenever you invest your money into something, you have to consider inflation, okay? If I'm investing in something that gives me a return of 7%, and inflation right now, let's say, is 3%, my real gain is 4%, okay? It's the difference. All right, moving on. Assets' real value rises if its price rises faster than inflation, okay? So in other words, if something goes up faster than inflation, that would be a really good item to get into, okay? So they showed U.S. farmland and housing is going up faster than inflation. So if you had a place to dump your money into, that would be it. Because not only is it guarded from inflation, it's going up faster than inflation. So for example, going back to that savings account, you had that savings account making 1%, and then inflation being 2%, so you're negative 1%. But instead, if you went into housing, we're seeing housing over here is up plus 56 compared to plus 32. Not only would you be above that 2%, you would actually be making gains as far as overall net value. However, when you look at all of this, okay, we see oil, we see diamonds, and you see some other things like silver and bonds, and these other things actually went negative, stamps and gold. What thing did the best in this era? 1991 and 2001, stocks, 250%. Okay. However, going back to that graph again, 1991 and 2001, it all depends on when you get out on those stocks. Overall, they're going to be good. You just have to make sure you have an ability to wait until you can pull out at a good time as far as stocks go, because you don't want to pull out during a bust. You don't want to pull out during the dot-com bubble that could happen right after that. Okay. Inflation. Uncertainties cause some individuals to change their consumption, savings, or investment behavior. Yeah, so if I think something's going up in value, I might buy it up, okay? Fear of rapidly increasing prices may deter consumers from making long-term purchasing decisions, okay? This is another thing. If you just don't think you can keep up with your expenses, everyone cuts back. This happens a lot. If inflation becomes too crazy high and people don't know if they can afford their normal things, they cut back, okay? Firms may postpone construction or not finish new construction. If they don't have an idea what the cost is going to actually be, they're going to wait till things stabilize. Okay, the Consumer Price Index, CPI, measures the change in average prices of consumer goods and services. Okay, so they have a Consumer Price Index. Take a look at all the prices and see what the average of those prices are as far as how they change. Okay, CPI is used to construct the inflation rate. They look at all the prices from year to year. They have these groups of prices, and they take a look at them and see what's the annual rate of increase in the CPI. Okay, what's changing? Okay, CPI relates to current prices in 1982 through 1984 prices. This is usually the year they use for it as far as Consumer Price Index. They relate it all to those prices. A CPI equals 230 in 2013 means that it takes $230 to buy what $100 could in 1982 to 1984, okay? So when they're looking at that CPI, it's always going to be base 100, basically, in its base year, which in this case is 1982, 1984. And then whatever the current year is, that's what they're saying, that's how much you would need to buy what $100 could in that base year, okay? Remember, the base is always 100 in the original year. And then let's say in 2016 it was CPI equals 480. Well, then it'd be $480 in 2016 money to buy what 100 could in that year, 1982's year. Major goal of economic policy is price stability to reduce the effects of inflation. Price stability is the absence of significant changes in the average price level. So in other words, things stay stable. They don't change as much. If they change gradually. Gradual changes are okay and expected. They change rapidly. People don't know what to do, and it sends shocks through the market. Okay, the full unemployment and balanced growth act of 1980 establishes a goal of economic policy to hold the rate of inflation at under 3%. So they're saying inflation's okay, but we don't want it more than 3%. If it gets over 3%, things get crazy. Okay, don't want to get into hyperinflation or stagflation. There's some whole lot of other types of inflation you get into. Goal of zero inflation may threaten the goal of full employment. Okay, prices are going to naturally increase when people are at full employment. Like I said before, demand's going to outstrip supply. You're going to have some, as you head towards there, you're going to have that inflation is just going to happen. Okay, Congress raised the trade-off between inflation and full employment. If zero inflation raises unemployment, people may prefer a little inflation. That's what I'm saying. People are okay with a little inflation if it allows them to counteract a lot of unneeded unemployment. You're going to have some unemployment you can't get rid of because of that seasonal, structural, and frictional unemployment we talked about earlier. Okay, but other than that, though, you should be good. The biggest thing is you want to make sure, going back to the unemployment, like we said before, if there's ever unemployment you don't want, it's that cylindrical one. Okay, cylindrical unemployment you don't want. Okay. 3% inflation was determined to be a safe target. They don't say why, they just determined it. Overall, it seems to be okay. Okay. Quality improvements in existing products and the creation of new products cause the CPI to not be a perfect measure of inflation. Okay, this is what's interesting. So they're talking about the shortcomings of CPI. If I was to buy a TV in 1980 compared to a TV now, all it includes is the price. It doesn't include how much better that TV is, because there's no way to put quality in there. Okay, they can put down the quantity of dollars it takes to buy that item, but they don't have a way to adjust for the quality of items being bought now, as far as how good they are, as far as cars, electronics, you name it. And so there are some deficiencies there. The place that's not deficient, though, is land and usually housing. Okay, land is pretty simple. We look at land as far as what it used to cost to what it costs now. We look at rents, same thing. Some things we can say, hey, this is pretty standard as far as figuring out how much it's gone up, okay, based on how much your purchasing power is. Okay, quality changes distorts our view on how prices have changed. Prove that new products cost more and enrich consumption, but may not be in the CPI. And that cost more thing, I'd put a little quotation mark on there, because sometimes they don't cost more. TVs have gone down a lot in price compared to what they used to, especially for the size of TV. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you could look at a phone costing more, but also if you're looking at the exact same phone, it might be a lot cheaper. Okay, as far as cell phones and stuff. Let's see, air due to quality improvements. They're just saying the inflation's okay because we're having more quality. I guess that doesn't really make sense for me personally, but they're saying that in the book. We just expect quality to happen over time anyway, just because of technological advances. Inflation's more has to do with employment. That's what they should be focusing on. Will another recession occur? Yes. We should expect another recession sometimes in the future, and we should expect multiples of them, because we're going to continually have the boom and bust. We just want to smooth it out. Okay. And when we talk about smoothing it out, when we get to the later chapters of monetary and fiscal policy, it'll make more sense. That's where we actually have tools to try to smooth it out more. Okay. Challenge of economic policy is to postpone, mitigate, and quickly end these recessions. Okay. So in other words, when we're feeling pain and misery, we try and get out of it. So again, this is the summary. We talk about growth, we talk about unemployment, inflation, full employment, price stability, growth, and inflation. The main thing I want you to get out of this chapter is this. Because we are not a planned economy, people will always over-leverage and over-invest during periods of boom when they see economic gains that are above normal gains. However, these will become overvalued, and then also we get to where demand outstrips supply because we're no longer efficient. We reach peaks. If that peak gets too big, you are going to end up with a boom or a bust from that boom. So there's the boom, and it's going to end up with a bust. It's going to go down, okay? And it's just going to constantly be that way. Constantly, over and over, you're going to see that. So again, you have your peaks and your troughs. That's what they use in the book. Most people just call it boom and bust. I mean, you have your bull markets and bear markets and stuff like that. Hopefully this makes sense to you guys. You guys can see our economy will always be this way. The only thing we can do, because it is capitalistic economy, is to use policy measures such as fiscal and monetary policy. We'll be talking about those later. Try and minimize these things and make it so we have more slow, not slow, but I should say balanced growth. Balanced growth. Okay. We definitely want fast growth as long as it's balanced and it's not going to lead to busts. If you like the video, put a thumbs up. Let me know if people are actually watching these, okay? Let me know if it's helped you at all. And again, like I said before, if you have questions, put it down below. There might be other commenters who can also comment on it. I'll try and get in there when I can. Take care. Have a good time, everybody.